Hello and welcome to Game Gumbo. Today we're unboxing the Feudal Village expansion to Shadows of Brimstone. So we've covered some Shadows of Brimstone content in the past. If you've watched any of that, you're already familiar with the game. If you haven't watched any of that, it is a cooperative dungeon diving style game for 1 to 4 players. A standard game of Shadows of Brimstone will take you about 2 hours, but that time will vary quite a bit by how much content you're including and how many sort of scenarios you want to go through. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's in Feudal Village. So as I said, Shadows of Brimstone is a dungeon delver style game where you and your party, or yourself controlling multiple people, will go out into a mine or some type of dungeon. You'll fight enemies, you'll collect gear before eventually fighting sort of an end dungeon boss. What Feudal Village does is it adds a framework to playing the game from sort of the village aspect, okay? So instead of going into a dungeon and just fighting monsters and doing all that and then resetting it and doing it again, now you kind of have this narrative element where, okay, we've gone through the dungeon, let's go back to town. Hey, there's things in the town we can do now, bandits have attacked the town, or we can build up the town, or things like that. So it kind of adds a whole new dimension to the game that I really appreciate, because I like that sort of town element of games in general. So there's a lot of content in this. We're not going to go through a ton of it. I do want to show you basically all of it, but I'm not going to sort of explain how everything does. What I like about Shadows of Brimstone expansions is this part right here. They are very particular in how they put in all these different things. So all these new mechanics, everything you see here with a highlight or a title here, that's a new mechanic that they have added in this expansion. So really this is a whole new aspect of the game. So a lot of it is new, right? But sometimes you'll get an expansion, especially one of the small box expansions, where this part of it is, 4 things. So, but I do like that they add specifically what's new right at the beginning. They don't make you go through it and kind of figure it out for yourself. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. You do notice, of course, that this has an Far Eastern theme to it. There is a version of this expansion that is the Wild West theme. So essentially the game has sort of 2 thematic backdrops. One is being Wild West, and one is sort of this Far Eastern theme. And you can buy a core box as well as this expansion in one of those 2 themes. So if you have a preference between them, you can pick which one you want. So again, new events that can occur. Your village can get raided. Arsonists are attacking. There's an assassination plot. All these different events can happen as you return to the village, and now you have to deal with that event. So this one right here, you return to the village and it's being overrun. So you can't do all your village actions that you were expecting to do until you deal with that. We got new events. So these are just events that you'll go through as you're traveling, essentially, but they add new events in this. And then they always add a painting guide in the back, because one of the big aspects of this game are the miniatures. And on the back, they have all the new items that you can get in town. And some of these I don't believe are actually new. I believe some of these are in the base game, but they do kind of give you just a reference guide, essentially. So now let's get into the actual components of the game. We got several different things here. Obviously tokens representing things like villagers. We've got sort of bad guys up here, maybe bandits, different items. So whenever you buy an item, you're going to get a little token for it. So just, again, different tokens representing different things. Again, all of our little resources, the things we can buy in town, like tea. We've got our different locations in town. So the tea house, the swordsmith, the gambling parlor, all these different things that I believe you have to build up to. aren't just readily available at the very beginning. And then we get to here, which is our town board. So as you can see, they've really made the town a whole new aspect of the game. I mean, it has its own board. So obviously you're going to be moving through the town at certain points, you know, fighting off enemies or what have you, and you need the board there with your little grid locations. And again, a lot of this is going to be familiar to you if you already have the base game, and if you're getting this expansion, you probably have the base game because you can't, this isn't a standalone, by the way. You have to have the base game to play this. So I probably don't need to explain to you how the base game works if you're looking at this expansion. We got our box with all our minis in here. Shadows of Brimstone and Flying Frog Productions is one of the few companies still doing sprue-based minis, which if you're familiar with just board gaming in general, you're probably familiar with just like mono-piece minis. Obviously, sprue-based minis you have to assemble, so there's a little bit of technical know-how there, but in exchange for that, you typically get higher detail from the miniatures, as well as the ability to customize them, right? So you can see here we've got several different heads. If you particularly like one, you can choose to add it to one of these people. So you've got your own sort of choices there. You usually have extra pieces when they do sprue-based minis. So you can see here, we just got a few minis in this one. These are like the bandits. So just a few swordsmen. And just got a couple sheets of those. We've got our sort of our bad guy stat sheets. And again, this is going to look really familiar to you if you already know the base game, so I'm not really going to explain it. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. Every enemy has a regular and a brutal side, so they're harder, obviously, on the brutal side. We've got daily events that can happen around town. You have different actions you can take now. You can help start a revolt in town. Different rules depending on the status of the village. So if the status is currently enslaved, you have special actions. Whereas if the village is haunted, you have different actions. So again, just different things that can happen in the town, different actions that you can do in the town depending on what kind of town it is. So monastery village, fishing village, mountain village, the trading port, the Takobaki village. I don't know what Takobaki is, but it's squid people, I guess. Interesting. And the Outlaw Haven. So kind of like a pirate town. I assume you have some level of control over which village it becomes. So new rules on visiting the village after you go into the dungeon. New rules in general for the village. The games you can play at the gambling parlor, right? So all this stuff, I really like all this stuff. This makes the game feel more lived in. Just to be able to, you know, go to the tavern after you come back from the village and gamble away everything you just won. It's entertaining. And like I said, it just makes the world feel more alive. So I really like this stuff. Got some. So here are the different locations you can go to. The tea house, what you can do there. Apparently, if you roll really badly at the tea house, you get poisoned. So that's not good. Different things you can buy there. You can see they all have a monetary cost to them. And so we have each of the locations. And I'll just go through, just flip these in case you're interested. And if you want to pause and look at them, you can. So again, all of these locations, I believe you have to, you know, they don't start in the village. You have to build up to them. You kind of have to prioritize which ones you want. And then the last thing we have are our cards. So some of these are just going to be explanations of the new things that this expansion added. So again, this is just explaining the tokens that we've already seen, how they work. This is another thing that Flying Frog does. You don't have to go to the rulebook every time you want to know what this thing does or what that thing does, because they give you these little reminder cards, which I like. So we got a new card if you're dishonored. Apparently that's a thing. We have new events. So these are just events. More than likely, yeah, you'll just draw one of these every day. You go back to the village, and sometimes, you know, the village is boring, so nothing happens. But sometimes there's a showdown, or there's heavy rain, or different things. The plague is running rampant. You know, there's a beheading. So, and then we have cards for the different encounters. These are just like threat cards. So as you're going through a dungeon, you're going to draw cards from the threat deck, and depending on what card you draw, different things are going to come out. So this is just a different, these are cards to include with the base game, right? So this will shuffle into your threat deck like normal. And now you can include these new minis that you just built in a standard game. And then we have here, we have some extra gear cards, and then we have some gang cards. So it looks like sometimes when you draw these, they're also going to make you draw a card. And these cards, looks like it changes different mechanics of the bandits. So you're not always fighting the same bandits. One time you're fighting the bandits of the Black Bay, and another time you're fighting the Men of the Dragon. Right, so it slightly changes the encounter just to kind of keep things interesting. New loot cards, just explaining, or just a way to gain the new loot items, basically. And then finally, we have the sort of the sometimes called a world card, but this is basically like the bad guy card, right? So this just essentially alters one of the fights. And that's it. That's everything in the Feudal Village expansion to Shadows of Brimstone from Flying Frog Productions.